He's a kind and gentle soul. His heart is never cold, so peaceful and poetic, with a message true and bold. He's never seeking praise, so silent and so grave, and his transcendental love is the magic in his ways. And when I see his love, I know I've got a long, long way to go. When will I taste the love that he is feeling inside?
Thank you very much for being here. This is our monthly segment of Seva Care Education. And today we're addressing a very, very important topic that I think a lot of devotees are concerned about and would like to be able to discuss more and hear your thoughts on. And that is the question of the pursuit of work life and spiritual balance in an unbalanced world. We like that title because we know there's a lot of difficulties in trying to pursue devotional life, and at the same time, we all have responsibilities as householders, making a living, working with non-devotees often, and then at the same time being able to pursue our devotional life. So we're really happy today to have Namamrita and Gadadhara Pandit Prabhus. They're both accomplished professionals in their fields and also very, very nice devotees who have been successful in both areas. So we hope that there's going to be some great information from you two on how devotees might, keep this balance in their life and be successful at both spiritual life and pursuit of a career and family life. Okay, first let's introduce our guests. Namamrita Prabhu, also known as Emmanuel Green, has been more than 20 years of experience as a commercial airline pilot. He was raised by Krishna-conscious devotee parents, grew up in ashrams around Europe, and was taught the wisdom and practice of bhakti from the very beginning. In 1998, he followed his dream of flying and moved to New York to pursue a degree in aeronautics. He now works as a captain for a major U.S. airline. He's based in Florida, where he lives with his family. Their country home is located near one of the largest Hare Krishna communities in North America. Now age 46, Emmanuel endeavors to strike a healthy balance between his work, time with his family, and devotional services, which include a monthly podcast and weekly community support groups. He and his wife view as a privilege the challenge of caring for their 17-year-old special needs daughter. His hobbies include gardening, paragliding, and playing guitar in his punk rock band. And he credits his spiritual master, His Holiness Radhanath Swami, for guiding him towards a life of adventure, service, and inner balance. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Gadadhara Pandit Prabhu. He lived as a brahmachari, as a monk, for 15 years in New York City. During that time, he became the first Hindu chaplain for Columbia University and New York University. I think those were probably very significant achievements, being able to do that. After leaving the ashram, for the last 12 years, he's been doing motivational talks in corporations around the country. So, a few questions for you both, and you can answer these in whatever order seems to be appropriate for you. But I guess the first thing we'd like you to do is tell us a little bit more about your work, and specifically, do you find the work that you do, is it conducive to your spiritual life? Does it present challenges? Does it present opportunities? Now, that's actually 3 questions, so we'll probably break that down. Perhaps first tell us what challenges you may have found. You want to begin, Gadadhara Pandit? We'll alternate.
Sure. So in terms of going to the field of professional speaking, that I jumped into that right after ashram life. So being a brahmachari, being a monk in New York City, my biggest service was speaking at college campuses about the principles, the practices of Krishna consciousness or Hinduism as a broader whole. And I was doing 3 to 4 talks every single week, basically, and got comfortable talking with students, trying to bring them a philosophy that they could relate to, because most of the people that were coming to our programs were not of Indian origin. They were Western people who were either coming from a Jewish background or a Christian background, but exploring something Eastern. And what a better place to explore it than with a monk on campus. Right. So it became the talk of the campus, sort of, as a monk teaching vegetarian cooking classes and teaching Bhagavad Gita and teaching meditation. So it was very, it's a time where they're so open and they're really ready to explore. So I did that for about 12 to 15 years, and that allowed me to get comfortable in front of audiences, which is something I was never comfortable with, by the way. I grew up absolutely terrified of public speaking. That never would have thought that's something I would ever do, and tried to avoid it like the plague as much as possible throughout elementary school, high school, and everything like that. And then even when I was asked to do that in the ashram, it was very, very difficult because it's not something I felt comfortable with. Like, this is not what I came to the ashram for. I came here to learn scripture. I came here to learn meditation and understand myself, understand the philosophy of life, but not to talk about it with others. So, but, I guess Krishna had different plans for me, and I found myself just doing a lot of talks every single day, every single week, every single month. And then when I left the ashram, gradually, even before leaving the ashram, like the year before I left, I started getting invitations from devotees who had mentored, cultivated, who were working in companies, saying, hey, can you give a talk at our company on work-life balance? Can you give a talk at our company on stress management? I said, well, I guess I can. I've done it for college students. How much different can corporate America be? And I didn't know. I just felt very confident I could, because I'd already done it hundreds of times. And so I did it the first few times. I think it was good luck, good karma, whatever you want to call it, but like the first few ones were like Google and Bank of America, like really, really big organizations.
That's all.
That's it. And so I landed at these places, and I was getting good feedback from my talks. And I said, well, so I'm about to leave the ashram. I need something that I'm going to do. I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. 15 years as a monk sounds cool, but it doesn't look good on a resume. It doesn't make the resume look good at all. So, but then luckily more doors kept opening, and I started speaking in organizations. So I wanted to give a little background into how I landed up as a motivational speaker in corporations on these topics of leadership, culture, and work-life balance. So the challenge is, I didn't find a lot of challenges in dealing with the outside public, because a majority of my time in the monastery, in the ashram, all of my outreach work was with outsiders. I was dealing with students who were not from Hindu backgrounds. Right? They were either atheists or Christians or Jews or Buddhists, some Hindus as well. So I'd gotten over 12, 15 years experience dealing with outside folks. So I got comfortable how to present in a way that didn't make them uncomfortable, that they could kind of being just very, very open and accepting of their philosophy and faith, or maybe even a lack of faith. So when I transitioned to speaking to corporations, it wasn't very difficult. Of course, the only challenging thing, which I didn't really find challenging, was that after an event, you go to the dinner or you go to a lunch and there's drinking going on. But for me, that was not a big deal at all. It's just like, okay, that's what they're doing. I'm not going to be doing that. So you're shaking hands, you're meeting people, networking. So for me, I didn't find a lot of challenges. Just the stages were bigger. The people were now on a highly professional level. I was speaking to people who were much more qualified than I was academically and occupationally. They were making tons of money. And here I am coming out of the monastery making very little money and made no money for 15 years. So that was the only sort of challenge, was my own, maybe a slight insecurity that these people are so much more qualified than me. They've been doing this for 15, 20 years. They're all probably making six figures or more. Some of them are VPs, SVPs, directors, sometimes CEOs. Like, these are people who have become seriously accomplished in their material life. And here I am. I've worked 2 full years in a corporate job, period, then monastery. I mean, I helped my parents with their business and stuff before. And here I am speaking to people. It's like a new guy speaking to senior people. It doesn't make any sense in one sense. But because I had a story of being a monk in New York for 15 years, that's what would captivate them. They're like, we want to kind of hear what that was like. And how does that translate into corporate America?
Which brings me to a question I had as you were speaking. When you're speaking to college students on campuses, you were pretty much giving them Krishna consciousness, and probably in a nice way, and you learned how to present it, but it was Krishna consciousness, pretty straight. Obviously, to corporations, you can't be preaching Bhagavad Gita, I would imagine, or was that part must have been a little different.
Yeah, so that's a good point. Yeah, on college campuses, I was teaching Bhagavad Gita in a very broad way.
Right.
Same thing with meditation, was a variety of things, not just Hare Krishna mantra, just so they felt comfortable with it. Now I enter the corporate scene, has to be 100% secular if you ever want to get invited back.
Right.
If you don't want to end your career after the first talk.
Right.
It's got to be 100% secular, it's got to be research-based, it's got to be relevant for what corporate America is going through, what the people in those organizations are going through, what their stresses are, what their anxieties are, how to improve their culture, how to improve retention. So I had to learn about this on the fly. I didn't know about that. But it's interesting. This is really interesting. When I started to look at a culture of a brahmachari ashram, I found a lot of similarities in a culture of corporate America, which is, you may think it's different, it is. Well, what it is that you've got a bunch of people in an ashram or corporate America from different age groups and different ethnic and cultural backgrounds coming together to work on a project and trying to move this company forward. Same thing in an ashram. People of different ages. I was living with 15 guys, all from different countries and who have different, they're all bilingual in different ways. And so we're trying to move forward one mission. They're trying to move forward one mission. So what happens? You conflict. I think I should do it this way, but I think this should be done this way. And now you have a choice to work together or to argue and fight and, get the whole thing stopped. Same thing's happening in a corporation. You have to learn how to cooperate. And so living in that dynamic for 15 years, I did have a chance to experience what it's like, what good teamwork is like, what good leadership is like, what bad leadership looks like. And I realized corporate America is functioning exactly the same way. So I started speaking in there and I started talking to people. I'm like, and so most of my content for my speeches, believe it or not, it may sound funny, is coming from my experience of observing SKCON leadership, the good, the bad, and the ugly, all of it, and presenting that in corporations, and people in corporations totally make sense. And they don't know where I'm getting that from. But for them, it's like, oh yeah, otherwise my career would have ended 11 years ago if it wasn't relevant.
That was fascinating. That was very interesting to hear. Namamrita, tell us a little bit about your work experience, your life career, and what challenges that may have been.
Well, I just wanted to thank you for doing this interview with us,
happy to.
and also mention that you are. We're kind of doing a double mission with this episode because we're also going to use it for our Nectar Talks podcast, and you're our first guest interviewer, so thank you very much for that. And
well, thank you for being the honor of being the first.
I'm also honored that, just knowing your background and your career as a teacher and an administrator and all the administrative positions you've had within SKCON, I think it's a great fit to be discussing this with you. So thanks for that.
You. And I'm very happy to be here and doing this.
This
and
is
I
great.
appreciate the invitation.
I'm excited about this for the three of us. For me, in my life, work is often where my Krishna consciousness, my spiritual life, that's where the rubber really meets the road for me. Because when I'm home, now this is all very individual. I'm speaking from my experience. I'm an airline pilot. I spend a lot of time on the road. I'm on my own. Got to deal with my mind all day long. Staying in hotels on my own. Not always able to, mingle, as Gadadhara Pandit mentioned. Going down to the bar with the crew is not really my way of life. But it is an environment where I'm challenged. I'm challenged to really introspect and think very deeply of what does it mean for me to be spiritual in this environment. When I'm home, I live here in Alachua. We have a beautiful temple community. I know exactly what I got to do. I got my sadhana practice. I can go to the temple. There's different spiritual events. There's service opportunities. But 50% of my life is on the road, on my own.
Yeah.
And I've thought about it a lot. I've been doing this for a couple of decades now, and I've tried different things, experimented in different ways, anything from trying to do some book distributions at the nearby park in the hotel where I'm staying to, I'm overnight. The great thing is I've been able to check out so many of our homes that Srila Prabhupada established, all the temples we have around the country. That's how I've gotten to see many, many of them. And I remember one, I went to this temple for the evening program, and I come back to my hotel, and I had some prasadam, and I was like, oh, I'm going to share this prasadam. So the next morning, here I am in the cockpit with my yogurt container filled with khichdi and a loaf of bread on top and a little bit of yogurt mixed in. And
pass them around.
Hey, you want some of this?
Only devotees.
So those were my humble beginnings.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting, and you partially answered that, because I was thinking when you said 50% of the time that you're on the road. So I imagine the lack of devotee association is one of your challenges. But it sounds like one of the ways that you have somewhat dealt with that is by trying to visit temples in the cities where you go.
Yeah, visiting temples. But those are different ways that I've tried to directly apply Krishna consciousness as we know it. You know, the practical rituals or whatever. But, you know, when I kind of zoom out at my experience with trying to be a devotee on the road, there's so many ways to look at it. First of all, career is our dharma. You know, for a grihasta, the person who's, you know, earning a living, or the mother at home taking care of the kids, you know, these are our lifelong careers, and that's what the Bhagavad Gita is all about. You know, Krishna is telling Arjuna, no, you need to do your job and do it well, but do it for me. So that's kind of the big picture. And then outside of that, you know, depending on what the profession is, are there some opportunities where you can very tangibly try to see Krishna? So for me, for example, every time I pre-flight an airplane, I chant the Nrsimha prayers, and then I'm chanting the Hare Krishna mantra until I finish that pre-flight. I never miss that on any single pre-flight.
I would love to fly on your planes. Feel safe.
But then in some cases or in certain professions, you know, maybe the best way to be a devotee at work is to just do the job the best you absolutely can. And if that your coworkers happen to find out you're a devotee, they'll find out, wow, those Hare Krishnas, they really do their job well. So those are different ways to, you know, different angles that I've thought of on how to look at my work. And there's great opportunities as well as great challenges in my particular profession, as I'm sure every profession, as we try to, find that line.
This question, which what you just said, reminded me of, and I think that many, many devotees would ask this or feel this or wonder about this. Do you make public? Do you make not at all? Are you completely secretive with your fellow workers about being a devotee, or do you try to take those opportunities when they're there? How do you approach that? Well, let's start with Gadadhara on this.
So I'm self-employed, right? So I don't have a group of colleagues or employees that I work with. Yeah. At every speech, though, right, I start off by telling my story because it's fascinating for them, how I became a monk and lived as a monk for 15 years.
So they know that right off?
Huh?
They know that right off?
Yeah,
then.
They know that right away. Mm-hmm. And so then I show them pictures of me growing up in America, helping my parents, just like, the pictures from the 80s. And then I finally tell them how I became a monk, went to India for a little bit, then spent 15 years in New York. And then I show them two pictures of me, one as a monk in India, one as a monk in New York. I'm wearing saffron, shaved head, some tilak. I don't, at that time, say I was a Hare Krishna monk. Mm-hmm. I don't say I was a Hindu monk. I just say I was a monk. 99% I'm automatically assume I was a Buddhist monk. Oh. Because that's how America, they sort of relate monastic life to Buddhism.
And the saffron robes, too, I think.
Saffron robes. And that's because, I think Buddhism has made it into Hollywood movies way more than, we've only made it into a few movies, and we were made fun of, actually, So because there've been so much, and Dalai Lama's in the movies, news all the time, so they automatically assume that, and I don't clarify. Sometimes afterwards, after the talk is done, they're like, hey, what kind of a monk were you? I'm like, oh, I was a Hindu monk, right? So I always say that because that's easier for them to understand, because it's a major world religion, as opposed to Hare Krishna. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'll say. A lot of times there'll be Indians in the audience, and they'll be like, oh, are you with SKCON? I'm like, yes, I am. They're like, oh, I used to go to this temple, or I have been to that temple, and and then it's totally cool. So that's how I approach it, is I just say I was a monk, right? And I'm not trying to get, at that point, give any designations, because the audience is filled with people of all backgrounds. And I don't want me saying a specific religious affiliation to turn them off, because some people could be very like, no, I'm not going to listen to this, whatever he's saying. It could immediately color their perception, and my rest of my talk is just about to begin. I don't want them tuning out simply because of my faith, and there's people like that.
Yeah.
So that's why I keep it pretty just sort of, that's it, I was a monk. And at the end, I do guide them through, I have the entire audience, hundreds, sometimes thousands, close their eyes and do some breathing techniques. Just breathing techniques. I'm like, look, don't worry, this is research-based, this is secular, don't run out of the room. I'm not going to ask you to become a monk. Like I say all of these things, it makes them laugh, it gets some, lighten the environment, and then I guide them through some breathing exercises. So for me, I keep it, if you want to call it, sort of, I don't want to use the word hidden, but I don't overtly talk about it, but there's 2 pictures of me in saffron robes, one walking down the street in New York City, and one sitting just cross-legged in a South Indian temple, which looks kind of cool. So I'm like, well, that's me, and here I am now.
It occurred to me that anyone in the audience who was really interested in spiritual life, especially Eastern religion like that, could figure out enough that they could talk to you further. Like you say, a lot of the Indian professionals, they probably figured it out, fairly soon, and then you have an opportunity to talk to them a little bit more and like that.
Yeah. So if they do, they get my contact information, they get my LinkedIn, they have my, my last sort of slide has all my contact information. Sometimes they do reach out to me and ask me a general question about life, the stresses they're going through, and sometimes that happens. It doesn't happen a lot.
Yeah.
It happens very, very minimal. Once every few talks, somebody will reach out to me and ask me a general question about life and what they're struggling with and how to handle it, or how can I do meditation better? My mind can't focus. I'm having a hard time with it. They don't go deeper into my own sort of background, and I tell them, look, I've got a couple books. If you want to know more about my life, you can read my book here and read this other one. So it doesn't happen. I thought in the beginning when I first started, I thought it would happen more because I was coming out of an ashram. I was like preaching all the time, and then it wasn't happening. So I'm like, oh, this is the reality. They just want the benefit of what I have to say. Yeah. That's all. Like, they're wanting you to get them from point A to B. They don't care what else you're practicing, right? They just want you to get them and land them and get them to their destination.
Right.
So they just want the benefit of how to sort of reduce their stress, be better colleagues, be happier, be peaceful. That's all they're looking for from me. And as long as I give them those tools, that's what the company wanted. That's what I give them. Employees are happy. And then one or two, like I said, may ask a slightly general, broad question, and that's it. Maybe a couple of times someone's asked to know more, and I've given them links to a Bhagavad Gita or something, but it's only happened a few times in like 11 to 12 years.
Okay. So Namamrita, do you find any opportunities for doing any outreach or being able to give Krishna consciousness to others in your career?
There's definitely great opportunities, but over the years, I've gone from really trying to throw that hook out to having a little bit more of a passive approach. It's a big thing in my world, and I'm sure the corporate world. You don't talk about religions or politics at work.
Yeah.
Right? That's just a big no-no.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that with the right person, you can't have an amazing open heart conversation about life and spirituality, and I've had plenty of those. So in my earlier years, that hook was always, I'm vegetarian, my wife's Indian, why do you live in Alachua, Florida? All right, those three topics, something about your family, the diet, hey, what are you going to eat today? So it always would come up somehow, or what brought you to Gainesville, I'm like, oh, well, there was a Hare Krishna temple. I'm born and raised. So those three things were always an opening, and it still is. But I do remember that, coming from being born and raised in the movement, we were a preaching movement. I had a lot more of a gung-ho approach back in the day. And then it could get a little stressful to try to do that, and it could be inappropriate, it could be uncomfortable. So I've taken more of a passive approach now, which is if it comes up, it does. Yeah. There's a really beautiful example that I was given when I asked this question to a professional. Do you know Mother Conti in Key West? Yeah. So we were visiting her once, and I asked her, do you preach at work? I think she worked for the post office. And she said, Srila Prabhupada, he is like the main artery in the body that is the preaching movement of ISKCON.
Yes.
And then you have, your big preachers, your sannyasis that are the big veins, and then you have the tiny little veins who we all have an individual opportunity to share whenever it's appropriate. And that really helped me. I don't have to be that big preacher at work.
Yeah.
I can just, when the time and circumstance is appropriate, and I've done that many times, and I've had incredible, sharing books, sharing YouTube videos, and I've had people come back to me years later, oh, I read that book, it was amazing, or one guy's quoting Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita because I, shared the Gita with him. So, I find that Krishna is the one running the show, and if I just have a sincere, passive desire to do it, it will happen when it's meant to happen, and it's always a beautiful thing.
I was thinking in the academic world, I think I had a similar experience to you two. It was not really appropriate to be very outward, and honestly, in the academic intellectual circles, to be too much into religion is probably considered not to be very enlightened, and their idea of enlightenment, of course, is quite different than ours. But I found sometimes with individuals, like for instance, I was head of the counseling program at one school, and the president. Yeah, we got along. We got to lunch together sometimes, and of course, he noticed I was always vegetarian like that, and we got to talk. Eventually, I talked to him, and he became a vegetarian. So, and he knew that I was a Hare Krishna devotee. So, I found sometimes with individuals you could make a difference. But but then I had an opportunity once, and I became the dean of the school, and I put on a conference on psychology and spirituality. It was quite interesting, and so, again, it wasn't like I stood up, I'm a Hare Krishna, but we moved into those topics to get people thinking about higher things in life, So, I think a lot of us have experienced that you have to have a little bit of a cautious approach in certain professional settings, but sometimes with opportunity, and I think what you said is right. Krishna will make those opportunities sometimes just sort of manifest for us.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, opportunities, some challenges. Have you found personally the challenges in terms of your own sadhana, your spiritual life, your hearing, chanting, all of our 9 process devotional service? Have you found that working quite a bit, as you probably do, especially at certain times, does that interfere? Is it difficult? Do you have to sometimes work on that balance? You want to start?
Yeah. I see a day and night difference from the time that I was in the ashram to now. It's literally
intense sadhana.
Yeah, day and night. Over there, it's in one sense you don't realize how good you have it until you leave the ashram. And it's like, wow, you just get this hour and 45 minutes in the morning where you have nothing else to do. You don't have to worry about paying a bill, fix a leaky plumbing pipe, change a diaper, you don't have to do anything. Like, nothing matters. Everything is taken care of. If the electricity goes off, you don't have to worry about it. You can keep chanting. Someone will take care of that, right? Someone's going to take care of everything. And you don't realize how lucky and fortunate you are. So when I did enter the speaking career, initially it didn't. The way... and traveling, and it's just it became harder and harder. Like, you're on an airplane and you're trying to chant, right? First of all, you got a hand in a bag, and then people notice that, and now you're trying to cover that with your jacket, and then you have a clicker, and then people are looking at that, are you trying to keep track of how many people are on the plane? What's going on?
You're terrorists, maybe.
Yeah, who knows, So. There's just all of these, and then all of that being so self-conscious about the little things, all the little things that our specific religion has that most don't. It's
not real conducive.
It's not, and then before I was trying to walk to the event, I'm having the clicker and I'm chanting, and I'm like, but if one of the audience members or the organizer sees me moving my lips, and it could just look weird. So then I had to become really, really cautious. So it did disrupt things in a big way. It did disrupt, and after flying, I get exhausted. I don't really want to chant at that point. I'm just I just want to relax, get ready, because I'm going to be up in front of 500 people tomorrow. I just need to be rested and relaxed. So it was very disruptive. Once I started getting into the flow of traveling more and speaking more and meeting more people, you're trying to squeeze in around here and around there and around here and around there, and I'm like, am I making orange juice here? It's like, what am I trying to do? Squeezing and trying to get around I just began to question, like, what kind of quality, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Am I doing this as a religion? Have I squeezed out the spirituality of this? Am I just trying to squeeze in around here? I'm like, it doesn't even feel Krishna conscious. It feels like someone has told me you have to do this or you're not going to make it. And I was like, why am I putting this kind of pressure on myself? But I think as a society, we have that pressure on ourselves, for better or for worse. I don't know, maybe sometimes more for worse. And so the real challenge came for me is, at the age of 50, we gave birth. My wife and I, we had a child. And you realize that's something that should happen when you're 30.
Yes.
I'm like, whoa, this is hard. Like, you can't even imagine.
No, I can.
Yeah, you definitely can. I mean, you're like, you've got a whole generation, kids and grandkids, and you've got you've got a lot going on in terms of family. For me, one kid, and I'm so grateful that I have this opportunity because I know I really wanted a child. And I just didn't realize how hard it is. Like, someone who doesn't have one can never fathom what it's like to have one. And that really did throw my sadhana off course in a way that I can't even imagine. Because it's just like waking up 4 or 5 times a night, or changing diapers, showering, bathing, medical needs, and just everything else. And it's situations it's not like we have our extended family around who's stepping in to help. It's you and your wife doing everything.
Yeah.
And so that definitely was more challenging than just the work thing. Because the work thing, I'm self-employed. I can find time during the day to do whatever sadhana I'm doing. But this was a whole nother challenge, which I didn't expect. And also the lack of energy you have once you hit that half-century mark to deal with the mind and the energy and unpredictabilities of a newborn/toddler. Right? So that's where I think my biggest challenge came in. And it continues to be a challenge which I'm trying to still figure out.
Do you have any, did anything seem successful, or did you find some solutions, or any way that you could help some of our audience maybe? Because I'm sure everybody deals with this. I remember my daughter, she was just initiated, I think, by Radha Swami, and then she had a young child, and she told me, she says, because she had to chant her rounds, she just took initiation, made that vow, and she said, I just get up as early as I can in the morning. I don't take a shower. I don't do anything but chant as many rounds as I can until the baby wakes up. Everybody has to. It's a struggle. How to make it work. Yeah.
Well, was that question directed
towards?
Oh,
I don't know. Either one of you.
I wasn't sure.
What experiences have you had?
Well, I just want to thank you for that. I couldn't have said it any better, and it's.
It was very honest and eloquent.
Yeah, and to me, this is, it's like life air to be able to talk about this, because it really is a sensitive topic. We all really want to follow our vows with sincerity. We know how important it is, and yet, practically speaking, it doesn't make sense. I can relate. For me, chanting on a clicker in an airport or in an airplane, I could literally feel the stress chemical shooting down my veins as I would click on that thing, because it was just not appropriate for me to chant in that kind of an environment. And I'm going to quote another really sweet devotee lady, Mother Malati. When I asked her about this, she said, when life is crazy and you just absolutely don't have the time, you need to be kind to yourself. But when you do have the time, that's when you have a solid responsibility to follow your vows and do everything you can. So I always just default to that, Of course, Maya, whatever you want to call it, is going to sneak into that little equation. And, well, am I just lazy right now, or do I really not have the time? So I struggle with that a lot too.
Well, can we? I guess there's always the elephant in the room in one sense, and it is a. I don't want to ask you, like directly personally, but I have the impression from my talks with people, and I've done a lot of counseling devotees, including younger devotees, my wife and myself, probably with hundreds of younger devotees, even just in this community, over 20 years, and I think that it's very common that many of our next generation, of course, you're all hitting middle age here, but let's say our, next generation find this difficulty. First of all, either to be able to come up to the standard, to be able to take initiation like that, or if one does take initiation, to be able to maintain that standard. Do you find among your peers that people do struggle with this?
Yeah, for sure. I'd say the majority of friends my age or younger, for a lot of them, I don't think it's even a consideration. But it's a big topic. I mean, that's a whole episode in itself.
Yeah.
That is a very big topic.
Yeah.
I mean, and I would agree with what Namamrita is saying is a lot of friends I talk to, it's just becoming increasingly harder to maintain, especially the chanting, and maybe as well as other vows as well.
Right.
And it's just, and I think one thing that I've thought about is that the guilt factor is what makes a lot of people try to finish their rounds, right? And that guilt can also lead to issues with their own, like, sort of mental health. It's like you were giving the example of your daughter, right? Getting up that early. So, and maybe she's totally fine doing that. What if by the time the child wakes up, she's emotionally and mentally depleted? But I've satisfied my guru, and now I'm going to give a depleted version of myself to the child who needs me the most, right? More than anything else, that child, all that person needs is you, and needs you to be in a good space. So,
but it's in our philosophy that the chanting of Hare Krishna should put us in a better space.
I think that's, I really think that it can, but not always.
Yeah.
Like, there's, if you break a leg, I don't pick up my beads, I call the ER. If I'm having a psychological mental breakdown, I reach out to a therapist. I don't pick up my beads. I mean, I can do both, but you can't replace chanting with a therapist or a dentist or a doctor or the ER room or a lawyer for legal advice or a financial advisor. You can't replace the Hare Krishna mantra with all of that.
Right.
So I think we do need to see, because it's a really big vow to make for the rest of your life. Like, what else do you vow to do for the rest of your life, right? And at the age of 20 that you...
Maybe
20,
marriage.
Maybe marriage.
That's about it.
Yeah, even that, right?
That
It's
doesn't always last.
It's half, 50%, right?
50%.
So I do. I've noticed, I've talked to a ton of my friends. I've had major ups and downs with it as well. And I'm just like, well, gosh, there's no simple solution. But I do think that the advice I would give is everybody has to look at their own personal situation, because my situation is different from Namamrita's, from yours. And if we put 100 devotees in here, each one of our situations is going to be different.
Right.
And I think we each need to analyze our situation in a healthy way and see what is best for my own personal mental well-being, what is best for my family's well-being, and how to incorporate our spiritual practices into that. Because if we make our spiritual practices, and I think this might be a little bit, challenging for a lot of people to hear, if we make our spiritual practice the primary thing and our mental health and family comes secondary, I think that's going to create a dysfunctional movement, and that's not going to be very healthy preaching.
Plus, I always heard that Prabhupada said health is number one. And then I think it was sadhana and then books or something like that. But if I had to wrap up this elephant in the room, which could be an entire episode on its own about initiation, the way I've come to terms with it for myself is that the standard that Prabhupada has given us of chanting 16 rounds, following the 4 regulative principles, is an absolute gift of life, liberation. We will find Krishna through that gift. I would never, ever want to compromise that gift. And I think that's the position of the initiating gurus, is they will never compromise that gift that they have also received from Prabhupada.
Yeah.
That being said, we all do our very best. We can have our private conversations with our individual gurus who will take the time to understand our circumstances and can give us particular guidance for this phase of life that we're in, just had a baby, whatever it may be. 17-year-old daughter with disability who needs care every single night to stay alive, you know?
Yeah.
And my experience is, no matter how much I may fail on the level of perfectly following my initiation vows, because I am trying sincerely, and I'm still trying sincerely, Krishna has showed himself in ways that I cannot deny it. So that, to me, is like we can bypass all of these things and just see, am I having a relationship with Krishna? And I think if with any sincere practitioner, whether it's in this tradition, which has these principles, or another one, we know if we have that connection.
And
So,
Krishna himself says that.
yeah.
You know, it's famous verses like in the 11th canto where, where Krishna talks about it. If my devotee is sincerely following, even if he has difficulty, even though he may, you probably know the verse better than I do, but, even if there are difficulties and he's not able to always follow, still he laments that. He feels sorry, he regrets.
Yeah.
I wish I could do better, Krishna. But Krishna says, but this is my devotee, and they will, eventually we will make it.
Yeah, I think he said if one commits the most abominable activity, if they're
Well, there's that too.
properly situated on the path, right, something like that.
Yeah.
I have to share another example. Another lady devotee, Mother Mandakini, who is my mother's high school friend. She is the mother of the Russian Yatra.
Oh.
I mean, she was the one that was sent by Prabhupada to marry Anantashanti, the first Russian devotee. She smuggled in the first set of Bhagavatam and Gita. I mean, incredible life story. Because I happen to know her very personally, I know that she worked for an insurance company in Paris for a 20-year career, if not more. She also had to take care of her husband that needed a lot of help. She had a daughter. I know that her sadhana was not up to the full standards for many, many years. And I talked with her about this, and I said, how did you handle it? And she said, I always had this prayer during my entire career. My dear Krishna, my dear Prabhupada, please keep the ashes of my devotion alive until a time when I can devote myself fully. Now, my mother shares an apartment with her. She never sees her. She is constantly traveling the world, leading thousands of devotees from, the Eastern Europe. She's always on stages giving classes. She's living that prayer now, And I love the example of your daughter. She did her best in that time for those circumstances. And I think it's really important to know that spiritual life is constantly, it's a dynamic thing. It's constantly changing. And part of the adventure of spiritual life is to constantly analyze it, introspect, and figure out, okay, what makes sense, what's logical, what's sincere, what's lazy, and know that it's never always going to be the same. I think, this cookie-cutter, one-size-fits-all idea of a devotee is what's made a lot of us really struggle, because we think it's got to look like this.
That's true. And I've always, a lot of times when I've spoken with devotees, and they may feel some struggle like that, and I've always said, we think that our spiritual life should be like this, but it's not. It's more like this, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ups and downs, hopefully going a little bit forward, hopefully more up than down, but there are going to be those.
Yeah.
There's going to be the downs, there's going to be the ups, and, again, it's like, your sincere prayers to Krishna is probably, the most important thing. Because it's a very special thing to be a devotee of Krishna, and it is, like you said, it's a relationship. There's reciprocation, and we all do the best we can. I don't know. I guess that's enough on that.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah. So, well, where are we? If you had one piece of advice, what would it be to our audience?
I think, trying to find Krishna in one's career, whatever it may be. This applies, like I said, to I see my wife struggling so much. Her whole, she thought she was going to have some sort of a life it turns out she's the manager and the number one caretaker of a child with special needs. That's become her entire life, and trust me, it is more than an airline career. What she has to do and manage doctors, therapies, caregivers, insurance, Medicaid, you name it. So, how can we find Krishna in that part of our life, which is very substantial? We spend a lot of time in this environment. My advice is that we should really take the time to analyze it from different angles with help of others and find out what are the different ways that I can find enthusiasm, because this is my dharma. This is a God-given dharma. Nothing, I don't think these are coincidences that we have these particular careers. So that being said, okay, let me embrace that and find ways where I can, practically do sadhana, be a really good coworker, or just how I interact with people within this world of my job is super important. How are we, representing or just developing our, ultimately for me, going back to God or the spiritual world, it's all about how much have we developed our personal qualities in relationships. So the workplace is a great place to do that. So just to remember that Krishna can be found in all the details of life, and definitely including our work. It doesn't have to be the actual tangible practice of sadhana or going to the temple. This is direct Krishna consciousness. Thank God we have that. We've been taught that. But I think it's an important step to also go find Krishna in these other details of our life.
Thank you so much. That's great. Gadadhara Pandit, final words?
Yeah, I think that as we grow as human beings, as we get older, our life circumstances change, right? You could have another child, you could move, you could lose a job, you can gain a job with more responsibilities. So many things in our life keep changing, including our own emotions, our mind. So therefore work-life balance, which is sort of like the topic here, I think it's going to be a constantly evolving thing as well. So you may find work-life balance for right now, but then, boom, your job requires you to travel 3 hours every day. Oh, something's going to change now. Or you just had another kid. Oh, we weren't expecting that. Okay, that's going to throw your work-life balance off course. Or or maybe you have lost a loved one, and now you have to deal with that, grieving for a while. So I think just to know, I don't think there's one way to achieve work-life balance. I think it's a constantly moving thing. And I think it's going to look different for every single individual and for every single family, right? So don't look at someone else and say, wow, they seem to have it figured out. Well, you don't know everything about their finances and about their health and well-being and relatives and support, and you're comparing yourself to them, right? So I think one thing is that we don't need to compare ourselves to other people's situations, because it's never going to be an equal and appropriate comparison, right? And so as we're growing, as things are changing, so is what work-life balance looks like. That's going to change as well. And I think all of these changes can be very stressful, as change usually is, especially unexpected changes. They can be stressful. And I think that one thing that I would personally recommend is, as we go through this, making sure that we find healthy friendships, like-minded friendships, that we can rely on and that we can reveal our mind to as we go forward. Right? Like Rupa Goswami talks about, right? Dadati prati grinati. That revealing your mind in confidence and inquiring confidentially. I think that is one thing that can keep us sane. Otherwise, you're just in your head with all the stuff that's going on and all of your struggles and all of your challenges, and you have no one to talk to. And you need a friend who won't just necessarily like preach back to you like, okay, hey, Prabhu, you're in my... No, you need someone who's mature, who can understand where you're at, and who can sort of guide you and comfort you and advise and instruct when the time is right. So that, obviously, that requires a mature person. And it's also up to us to make sure we find the right people. to guide us or just to comfort us in that moment. So I think that that's one of the biggest things, one of the most important things for me is to be very proactive in maintaining friendships and looking for friendships. And I'm very grateful that I've found that in Namamrita also. We talk regularly, reveal our mind to each other about whatever we want to, and it's great to have that. And I think if we can have a few people like that, where we can openly reveal, I think that will help us probably more than many things.
That was actually going to be the next question I was going to ask, which you answered really nicely about how important is it, our sadhusanga, our relationship with devotees, from either equals, peers, or with mentors, with seniors, or like that. How important is that to help us to navigate these different issues of work-life balance?
Yeah, I think it was Gadadhara Pandit who told me once that, because I always felt, a while back when I was maybe in my 30s, that I only want to hang out with senior devotees. I felt like, my coolie peers, they don't have much to offer as far as life advice and all that. But if you just stick around long enough, eventually your peers will be more appropriate mentors because they're going to be able, as adults, mature adults, they're going to be able to relate a lot more with your life experience for this generation. So that was good advice. But I wanted to ask you the question of, what would your advice from your experience in your career as a teacher and a devotee? It'd be great to hear from you what that would be.
Well, as we've been discussing today, it's a complex issue. And I agree with what you were saying, that it's not a cookie-cutter solution. It's not one size fits all. And by the way, I'm sure you've heard all of us older devotees regaling this issue. But believe me, it was much more difficult in the beginning. There was a certain fanaticism in the movement. You might find yourself in a temple where you were a householder with 30 brahmacharis, that kind of thing, And so it was, it often was very difficult, and there was a lot of pressure, and the balance was so shifted the other way to all spiritual life and very little concern for the family life or for development like that. So I think that as a movement, we're more mature. As a movement, we're seeing much more of that balance in our community, particularly in a large community like Alachua, with so many householders and so many families like that. But I would always advise devotees to try to keep moving forward, because if we're stationary, the tendency is to go backwards. So in our spiritual life, try to look for opportunities to just increase even slightly. To chant a couple more rounds or better rounds, or in fact, often with couples, which we did a lot of counseling with, who seemed to have certain conflicts like that, just sitting down and reading together for a few minutes. They said, "Oh, we don't have time." 5 minutes. Sometimes just small acts are very important. Small, significant acts that kind of keep us connected. And I think the other thing that sometimes gets lost when people are very immersed in their work and their family like that is, what is your mission? Yes, we have a mission, Lord Chaitanya's mission, Prabhupada's mission. We're part of that mission, but we all have our own individual mission within the big mission. And what is that for you? You both seem to be getting some grasp on that, I think. I sense from you that you talked about your work dharma. You have a sense of that. You have a sense of doing that well and being a good example, and at the same time, of course, trying to do what you can in terms of Krishna conscious practice. And I think, though, that if we have a sense of the greater good, or and even if it's something like, well, in the future, when I have, in other words, working towards something, even if it's not right now. Of course, it's easy for me to say, being retired now, I have a lot of time. Well, of course, I have my own issues, but then you run into, of course, in old age, health issues and so many other things, going through cancer and things like that. But
that'll take up a lot of your schedule.
That took up a lot of my schedule for a while. But once that was through, so I have the luxury now of being able to have time in the morning to chant my rounds nicely, at least try to chant them nicely, I should say. And so it's, and that's the other thing. One of you alluded to this idea that different times of life are going to be different. And that's why the Vedic system has brahmacharya, like grihastha, vanaprastha, sannyas. I mean, we don't follow that so strictly anymore. It's hard to follow, any of that to the letter. But the principle is there. That as we get older, we become a little more detached from material life and circumstances, and are able to go more inward, I think. And because I think you get to a certain point where you have all of this motivation towards service, but you don't have the energy. So a lot of what we have to do, I think, as we age, is to internalize Krishna consciousness, and that's that could be a whole nother seminar for us. But
yeah, thank you. It's good to think of that. What is our personal mission, and how can we make sure we're always making some form of progress, even if it's a little bit, not stagnate.
Yeah, because sometimes I feel like some devotees, it's almost like they feel lost. Like, what am I doing? Where, I'm trying to do this, but it doesn't make sense anymore, like that. And the problem is if people get overwhelmed with the difficulties they're encumbering, they can sometimes lose faith. And that's probably the worst thing. The worst thing is loss of faith. And so that's where I think the association of devotees, having those friends, having people to talk to, saying, and not saying, buck up and, be Krishna conscious, but, I understand how you're feeling. That's really difficult. You empathize with the person, and then you might, as a friend, say, I've done this in that situation, or offer what you can to help them, to give them support.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're at the end of our hour, and I think we've had a wonderful talk here. I've been very much appreciative of Namamrita Prabhu and Gadadhara Pandit Prabhu, who have given us a lot of insight in this very fascinating and important question of our work life and spiritual life balance. I don't think we've solved it, but I think that we've had a good discussion about it.
I don't know if it's solvable or not.
It may not be solvable.
It can be a constant point of discussion.
It's a work in progress. What I wanted to tag along with when you were speaking about what it was back in the day, where it was mostly brahmacharis and maybe one grihastha in a temple. It's important, I think, to recognize the history of this movement and what phases it's gone through and what phase it's in now. It started with emergency work. Srila Prabhupada had a decade to establish a worldwide movement, and thank God for all of his disciples to have made that happen.
And get millions of books distributed and everything that he did.
Yeah, so that was an extreme focus and priority, and that's exactly what had to be done. And thank God that you did it. Now this whole other part of how do we get established as grihastas within this world, the secular world, and still be true to our spiritual background, that's the work of the next generations. And that's still a work in progress, and there's a huge amount of progress that I think has been done and more to be done, but it's a beautiful service that we get to contribute to. So I'm grateful for that, even though a lot of times it can be like pulling my hair out. So, yeah, I think we all have a lot of service opportunities.
I think you two are both just wonderful examples of devotees, householders, people with careers, and we really appreciated having you here and talking to you. And
thank you so much.
It's very enlivening to me. I very much enjoyed this.
It was a great conversation. Thank you for facilitating it. This is a much-needed conversation, I think.
You do a good job at it.
Well, thank you very much. All glories to Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
You'll find no lust and greed in a heart that's pure and free. He's a lover of the Lord, and his life is ecstasy. He only dies to live, and living tries to give the happiness that's found in the sound of Krishna's name. And when I see his love, I know I've got a long, long way to go. When will I taste the love that he is feeling inside?